Okay. Still sounds just a little bit hot. Would turn it down a little bit. I mean, it's not like I typically need a whole lot to be heard. However, Zoomers are not in the room, so we have to remember them as well. And I hear that we do have a few. I don't see them on the screen, so I'm just going to say hi, and we'll get started here in just a moment. For those of you who are in the room, there should be a handout available. If you don't have one yet, Michelle has been gracious enough to dispense them, and just raise your hand or gurgle or something, and she'll come get you one. Thank you very much for being here this morning. Um, Personally, I really think that Bible class time as a group is a fantastic thing to be doing. I learn from you guys all the time, and that's what we're supposed to exhort and admonish one another and encourage each other. And that's one function that Bible class is intended to do, and does pretty well, I think. Singing as well, and singing and Bible class are not that dissimilar when you think about it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we just continue to explore the Psalms. Stephen, or is it Steve, do you prefer? Either one? Okay, either one. I prefer, I'm really bad about stuff like that. Sorry. Steve, good to have you with us this morning. Thank you for being here and coming by and seeing us again. It's been a while since you visited here last. Does it still look the same? All right. We've got a couple of them still back there. We can go get you one. We're in a series of study of Psalms, thanks to Michelle. The Psalms are always something that in my opinion, the Psalms are always something that the church has kind of given lip service to. I mean, it's a good thing. You ought to read it, and we ought to talk about it. Don't pay any attention that most of the Psalms and hymns that you sing are based on one of the Psalms. Don't worry about that. And by the way, so many of the texts that you will read in the New Testament come from the Psalms, but don't be concerned with that. Oh, and by the way, preachers tend to talk about stuff that you can find in the Psalms all the time, but that's neither here nor there. Psalms is, I believe, right up there close to one of the overlooked sources of inspiration and nearness to God that there is in the entire text that's been preserved for us. Now, I'm not going to get on my soapbox here, but I will tell you there are several other books that we also don't pay much attention to. You ought to quit that. Go ahead and read them all. I'll admit, Song of Solomon is a tough read, but if you approach it from the right way, it's fun. Anyway, we're going to look at Psalms the 37th today, and we will not finish today. Hopefully, there will be a chance for me to do a part 2 later. It's not important that I don't. We're going to get the really good stuff today. The in-depth view of some of the things in Psalms 37 will wait for another time. Might do that on a Wednesday night. By the way, that's if you're missing Wednesday night classes, don't. It's good stuff. Particularly right now, we're going through people telling their story. That's a very important thing for a church family to do. Before we start looking any further at the Psalms, though, let's take a word of prayer. Father, dear God, thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us one more day and the breath that we take. Thank you for the blessings that we've already enjoyed. And Lord, we look forward with great anticipation to what you're going to do today. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the inspiration and the learning and the encouragement that we get from it. Lord, I just ask that you go with this fine group of folks today gathered to study your word. and help us to gain some new insight or strengthen an understanding, or maybe even find something that we hadn't thought about before. Lord, thank you and bless your name, because it is the name above all names. Amen. Psalm the 37th. Like I said, if you have a handout, you'll be able to follow along pretty easily on this first part. If you don't have a handout, please do something to try to get one. Michelle's got some of them. All right, let's look at the handout. We're actually going to use this one quite a bit in the next few minutes. A very general statement here. The Psalms are kind of divided into several groups. You're going to find out today that 37 doesn't fit either of these groups really well. Songs of gratitude, songs of joy, songs of praise, songs of thanksgiving, and songs of lament are also fairly common in the Psalms. Psalms is one of the reasons that I think it's so valuable is because it's poetic expression. Poetry, like our songs that we'll be singing some of them in a minute. We've got books that are full of them. We've got some printed sheets out there out in the lobby about the songs that we'll actually be singing today. Songs communicate to us at a different level. They're also one of the values that songs have, and every time I say song, remember I'm saying psalm, or every time I say psalm, remember I'm saying psalm. It's basically the same idea. One of the values of songs, or as they get into our mind like a mind worm. Sometime during this morning, you will remember a song because we're singing it, and you're not even looking at the music anymore. Now, Twyla would rather you look at the music, I understand, but the words will come flowing. And the reason that's so is that something in our minds are attuned to easily memorize, or at least become very, very acquainted with songs. You remember the Itsy Bitsy Spider. How many of you could take that on right now and know every word? I mean, this is, if your grandchildren are all too old now, you may have forgotten it, but I guarantee you it'll come right back to you. We remember these things because of rhythm, tonalities, repetition. But usually, if you really pay attention, it's the words and how they tend to follow rhythm and other things like that. I'm not a music expert, but I'm telling you, music is intended, I believe, by God to reinforce ideas and to make them easy to remember. Dave was sharing with us just recently about the Psalms that were associated with the Passover. Based on what I've read, and he certainly, as I recall, said it, these were done by memory. They were done by rote. In the scripture, when we see Jesus and the disciples leaving to go to the Mount of Olives, they are singing a hymn. It's one of these psalms, and it's probably, we already know which one it probably is, but that's not the point. They didn't have a book in front of them. They were quoting this lyrical poem by memory because they had been doing it ever since they were small children. The itsy bitsy spider. And that's what one of the values of Psalms, and it's one of the things that we don't appreciate as much because we have it in black and white. Psalm 37 is what's called an acrostic psalm. I've talked about this before because for some reason or other, these are appealing to me for the last year or two. I keep looking at them and wondering, wow, A, B, C, D, and each one. And that even aids the memory process, by the way. And that's exactly, I believe, the reason that some of the Psalms are written in that way. Acrostic simply means that each verse, and in this case, it's a couplet, verse 1 and 2, represent a couplet. Typically, if you go through the psalm, if you have a modern version, they are divided into the appropriate couplets to go with the Hebrew letter. In the original manuscript, that Hebrew letter would be in the text. It would be part of the text. I don't know why, but we left them out. If you'll look at your newer text in Psalm 119, however, you'll see that the appropriate Hebrew letter for each of the verses there is labeled in most modern versions. I don't know why, just the way it is. People do strange things when they interpret scripture. They do even stranger things when they print it. I don't know. But it's one of the things to understand that knowing that the verse, before I go any further, the Hebrews don't divide their verses the same way we do. In fact, there is no division. They are divided by these letters, A, B, C, and so forth. That makes for some confusion because people who think they know what was trying to be communicated will divide the verses accordingly. If you've been in any of my Bible classes over the last couple of years, you know that I often think that they make a terrible mistake by dividing the way they do. We were just talking about that in 1 Corinthians not too long ago. But the idea here is these ideas of gratitude and joy and thanksgiving are intended to evoke a certain, not only learning, but they're intended to evoke emotion. And the lyrical style of poetry, which is not the only kind, but the lyrical style of poetry is intended to not only evoke emotion, but to actually create an image. Images come to mind when we read or sing or say these psalms. And the emotions that are evoked and the images that come to mind are often useful as that part of memorization process. I don't know. Let's just think about Psalms 23 for just a second. A very lyrical poem. Very lyrical poem. I think it's probably the best example that I can think of in the entire set of works of the Psalm. Walking through green pastures is something that we could all relate to. Now, where I grew up, you had to watch for certain things on the pasture and don't step in that. But and here in Texas, there's fire ant beds, so we don't just close our eyes and walk through the pasture. We've got to pay a little bit of attention. But that's the images that are provoked and evoked. This idea of being just imagine for a moment being in a perfectly mowed pasture, not mowed by machines, mowed by sheep. And there's no fire ants and there's no cow poop, and it's just relax and enjoy. I shall not want. I don't need anything. This is practically perfect. And in the presence of God, it's made perfect, of course. So we have this lyrical style of poem. And remember, again, it's designed to evoke emotion and imagery. In the 37th Psalm does have, I believe, some lyrical portions. Let's look at verse 2. This is the ESV that I'm reading. For they will soon, it's talking about the wicked, they will soon fade like grass and wither like the green herb. Now, as I said earlier, some of you weren't in the room. I grew up in this part of the world, southern Oklahoma, not too far away from here. This time of the year, I did not have to mow grass. The front lawn at my house was Bermuda, dead as a post at this time of year. No rain, too hot, but it's not dead. The minute it rains, if you run water on it, it'll green right back up. It's only dormant. It's resting because it's too hot. It's too dry. I'm going to wait until conditions are better. For the wicked, in verse 2 here, they think the conditions are just fine all the time. So, man, they're just greening up. But the poet is saying that those conditions won't last and you will fade. You will fade just like grass. That image is easy for us to understand. You just look out here in our front yard. That's pretty dead out there, but it's not dead, particularly the weeds. They'll be right back real soon. Let's look at verse 6. I love this one. And by the way, there are some more. If you want to go ahead and be glancing through 37, I'm going to ask in a minute if you see any more imagery that you would like to share with the class. It's there. I'm just not going to tell you right now where it is because I'd like for you to discover it yourself. Verse 6. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light. Well, that's kind of intriguing, but look at what he says. And your justice as noonday. What's special about noonday? On a day where we have sunshine, what's special about a noonday? It's really bright. The angle is at its most efficient for generating light and warmth. And that's why around noon it starts getting really hot. And then the effects of that heating show up about 3 o'clock when it's 103 degrees, and it'll stay that way until 6 o'clock. Just because of that noonday brightness. As the angle of the sun changes, it begins to cool a little bit. By the way, that's a good reason for having winters occasionally. We need to change the angle. But this psalm is has got a whole lot of imagery in it, but not as much. And I'll tell you why. In my opinion, this psalm, whoop, there goes some notes. This psalm is actually more like a proverb. If you'll look, as you're looking for imagery, look and see how this is worded and see what you think about the comparisons here between, is this read more like a regular psalm or song, or does it sound a little bit more like Proverbs? This sounds to me and reads to me like wisdom literature, which is what Proverbs and some other books are. They're lumped as wisdom literature. The proverb writer in chapter 2 says that all of this, well, let's just read. That's a very important thing to read. Proverbs 2, verse 6 and 7. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity. Now that's a proverb. Now proverbs are very generally speaking, very brief sayings. In fact, they tend to be little clips of memory. You may not remember the entire proverb, but you remember stitch at 9. You may not remember the whole proverb, but you remember spoil a child. There's key phrases that we tend to remember because they're very often in a culture that is familiar with them. They're a general truth, and we recognize them as a general truth. And they're put in little phrases so that they hit us right where we live, so that we are recognizing that here's some truth. And very often the Proverbs will take a piece of truth, and then they'll, of course, something based in common experience, and then, of course, they'll make them applicable to our walk with God. Now, this is a very valuable teaching method. It makes us do a critical evaluation. We'll take an idea, and we'll say, how do I measure against that idea? Or we'll take an idea and say, oh, that's a desirable goal. Or we'll take an idea and we'll say, I should have thought of that. This psalm reads a whole lot like Proverbs. The wisdom literature has Psalms as part of it, or several of the Psalms for sure are part of it. One of the main, I shouldn't say it that way, a very important item in Hebrew poetry and in the wisdom literature associated with it is this idea of parallels. What the writer will do is he will give you an idea, And then in the very next verse, he'll basically say that same idea, but use different way to approach it, or use different words to describe it. How might this aid memory? First of all, it's repetition. It's just saying the same thing over again, but in a slightly different way. But how would that enforce memory? Any ideas? I'm not a language or communications scholar here, so I don't think I can tell you why, but I know it works. This idea of parallelism, that the thought is the same but repeated, and that's very common in the Psalms. Let's look at a couple of verses here in the 37th. By the way, remember, look for imagery. If you find it, I want you to talk to us about it. Verse 37. Chapter 37. Let's look at a few images. Now, I need some readers. I need someone to read Proverbs 24:19. I'm going to need 3 readers. Proverbs 24:19. Do I have a volunteer yet? Okay, Jen, Proverbs 24:19. I also want you to be prepared. Go ahead. That'll be fine. Read it. I want you guys to look at verse 1 of this Psalm, 37, verse 1, while she reads.
Got it? Okay. Do not gloat when your enemy falls. When they stumble, do not let your heart rejoice, or the Lord will see and disapprove and turn his wrath away from them. Is that the right one?
I believe that is not the right one.
No, that's not the right one.
Did I?
Do I? 24:19?
Yes, 19.
Oh, I said, okay, so how about this one?
Right.
Do not fret because of evildoers?
Yes.
Or be envious of the wicked?
Yeah, go ahead.
For the evildoer has no future hope, and the lamp of the wicked will be snuffed out.
Now, for anyone that was listening to her read and watching verse 1 of 37, is there any similarity whatsoever? It's almost word for word. Now, again, same idea, but a little bit different. Now, that's Psalm 37, by the way, is attributed to David. It doesn't matter. I think it probably is David. Who knows? The Hebrew text says David wrote it. But they added that well after David would have penned this song. Don't know who the writer is, but it sounds a whole lot like a writer that we think we know who wrote Proverbs 24:19, and it was a son of David. So I want that to set in your mind for just a minute. Let's look at another one. I need another reader for the second proverb, verse 21. Okay, now do I have a volunteer yet? Proverbs 2:21. Jen looks like she's ready again. She wins the prize. All right, before she reads, I want you to look at the 9th verse of the 37th Psalm.
You said Proverbs 2?
Proverbs 2, verse 21.
For the upright will remain in it. Well, for the upright will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it.
Very good. So verse 9b, basically the second half of verse 9, is roughly equivalent to 2:21. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean Solomon's ripping David off? Maybe. A good son that hears good things might repeat them later if Dad said it. Oh, by the way, I wonder who he's talking about when he says my son in those first 7 Proverbs. One of his kids? Or maybe it's David talking to Solomon. Solomon just incorporated it. I don't know. Think about that. It doesn't matter, but I find it quite fascinating. Let's look at one more. And this is almost verbatim. I need someone to read Proverbs, the 16th, verse 8. Jen wins again. You know, this is starting to sound like Wednesday night prayer time. We all want to rush up and say, yeah, I'll do that. Go ahead and before you start, I want everyone else to look at verse 16 of the 37th Psalm. Listen and compare.
Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice.
Sound familiar? Does the 37th Psalm have anything to say about that topic? By the way, this is one of the verses that we'll look at if we do a second class. This is deep stuff, in my opinion. It's way more than we realize. And it fits this psalm so well because you know what this psalm is about. You've already looked at it enough, haven't you? What is it about? What's the main theme of this psalm? And don't look at your handout. That's cheating. What's the main theme of this psalm? Righteousness pays. That's certainly a theme of this psalm. I don't know if it's the main one, but it's right up there close to the top. I'm thinking of one more that I would elevate. Don't envy the wicked. What are you thinking? By the way, this psalm basically is saying that the wicked, that their day is coming and they won't last. It won't last. How's that supposed to make me feel? Think about it. Think about it. Think very carefully about it because the church has a real bad habit. You're in Jerusalem. You don't belong in Jerusalem. Let's just go kick you out. And we'll do swords with it to make it happen. What are you thinking? That's the stupidest idea I ever heard. And I'm sure there were some people back in that day saying, this is a really stupid idea. That's not what Jesus would do. They kind of got overwhelmed because kings have certain agendas. The church has certain agendas and they've got to be met because we're people and people do dumb things. And we get other people to help us do them. Particularly if we're convincing, oh, it's a holy place. We can't let the heathen have it. Who better to inherit a holy place than the heathen? Yeah, I know. They'll tear it up. They'll destroy it. But it's just a place. Now, the psalm is trying to say, you should not envy, you should not honor, you should not in any way think that wickedness pays off. And that's what Lawrence was saying. Righteousness is what pays off. Now he's going to ask some interesting questions about that, and so are we when we get to it. But notice here, that this idea about better is just a brief time with the righteous. Better is just the little that the righteous has. Better is anything about righteousness and the righteous than it is about the wicked. I think as modern believers, we struggle with that because we don't tend to think it's true. In fact, I'm pretty sure that there's a whole lot of times we just seem maybe not be quite so righteous and enjoy the benefits of being something else. I will confess that there were many times when I had small children, basically living from paycheck to paycheck, but fortunately, God blessed me to where that didn't last all my life. And I saw other people buying vacation homes. They weren't making a whole lot more money than I was. I know, because the jobs are roughly the same. They were buying boats. Okay, yeah, I know. They were going into debt out their wazoo, and I understand that. But that's because they had cash flow to pay the debt. I had cash flow to pay for groceries and doctor bills and clothes and shoes. Same cash flow, different uses, and not as much debt. But that's a choice. That's a choice we make, right? I was one of these foolish people that thought you really probably ought to avoid getting into debt too much. Not that I have managed to avoid that for long, but I did at least think it was a good idea to stay out of that trap for most of the time. So there's these things you look at these people and you say, I don't understand. I'm barely making it, and they've got money to flaunt. Have you ever had that thought when you're on your knees talking to God or in the car thinking, Lord, what's going on here? I'm not that bad a guy. In fact, we've fallen into the trap of doing just like this psalmist does, just like David did. And we say, after all, we're righteous. By the way, David, I need another reader. Gene, you ready? Psalms 143, verse 2. David is referring to the righteous as if they actually exist. Did you notice that? Now, you've heard me in my classes before, and I'll say it again because I just love it. Why do bad things happen to good people? Because there are no good people. Bad things always happen to bad people because that's the way the world is set up. If you're going to have a flood, is it because you're bad? No. There's a flood. You're bad. You just happen to be in the same place at the same time. Cancer? You get cancer because you're a bad person? No. You're a bad person. You just happen to have cancer because of the statistical probabilities that that's going to happen. And in some cases, genetic tendencies. It's not your fault. You didn't want it. You don't need it. Congratulations. You're not good either. Read Psalms 143, verse 2, please.
Do not bring your servant into judgment, for no one living is righteous before you.
Woo! Woo! That hurts. After all, church folks are righteous, right? Oh, wait a minute. Let's explore that just another second or two. People who are believers, whether they go to church or not, they're righteous, right? Everyone that's a believer in God is a righteous person. No. Let's see, how did Jesus put it? I mean, someone came in and said good to him. And what did he say? Why do you call me good? Now, by the way, that's a rhetorical question in his case, because he was good, but he was asking a very interesting question. Do you know any good people? Think about it. Do you really know any good? By the way, some of you guys are pretty close to good. I'm going to have to confess. I look up to you. I admire you. You're good folk. Most of the time. And that's the problem that the righteous have. We try to live up to a measurement of righteousness that we perceive. That God has told us what He thinks is good and just. And so the psalmist says, okay, we're trying to live up to these things. We're trying to be righteous. In fact, in his idea, we are righteous. And yet we look at the wicked and they prosper. What's going on with this? Well, the simple answer is let's see, it's another thing that the book says. God dispenses rain and it only falls on good people. It's amazing how that happens. That's not the way it works. It's not the way. The variances in the way we're treated by other people. If we're good, we always get the best. If we're not, that's not the way it works. Not going to ever work that way. That's not the way this planet is designed by God. This is one of the things. This is one of the things that's really going to make the new heaven and new earth really special. Only the good will be experienced. None of the bad, or what we call bad. This is the writer trying to communicate some really deep and important ideas, and he's so right. He says, why are you worried about what the wicked are doing? Why are you fretting? And we'll explore this a little bit more next time, if there is a next time, but I do want to talk for a moment about fret. When I say fret, What do you think of? First word, English word, worry. Nope, you're wrong. That is correct, by the way. For in our language, it's not correct for this language. I do not understand why they translated this fret, because it communicates a bad idea, I think. Are we not supposed to worry? No, we're not supposed to worry. The Lord's been very clear about that. You can't make one hair on your head grow, so why are you worried about stuff like that? You cannot possibly guarantee your next meal, so why are you worried about that? I'm the one that's supposed to be taking care of you. And yet we worry. And often we think worrying a little bit is a good idea, because after all, I do have to be concerned about paying the bills. I do have to be concerned about not having my car repossessed. Man, but when we worry, it's almost always about things. We also worry about each other. Cheryl's at home, by the way. She did fine with her procedure, but she's got a nasty cough and sore throat this morning. We've tested. COVID was negative. However, I'm worried about her because this is not a good thing when you got a nasty cough and a cold sore throat. Usually it's fairly minor. It goes away. But you know what I mean. You all have loved ones that you care about. We worry about things like that, and yet the other part of us, the part that Jesus has informed, tells us that's God's business. Leave it to him. Whoa. Really? Lord, protect, defend, heal. That's your business. Through your son, Jesus, I pray. The psalmist here is so busy trying to convince us not to fret. And in the original language, basically what this means is the best way to translate it in our language is don't get in the dither. Don't get hot and bothered. That's even that's the most best probably translation. Don't get all heated up and bothered by it. The original language, it means not to get heated up I can't, just went brain dead there for a minute, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's just don't get all that upset about it. Agitated is a good word for it. Agitated, but with some feeling. The word means don't burn up, don't burn over it. Woo! We translate it into something we can handle. Don't worry about it. It is a common problem. I don't think I'm the only one that confessed to this problem. At times we look at it, we say, God, I do not understand. I'm trying to be your person. I'm trying to do what you want. I'm trying to live right. I'm trying to act right. I'm trying to say the right things in the right times and in the right ways. My neighbor is going to hell in a handbasket, and look at what he's got, and look at what I've got. It's human nature. There's a reason why God tells us don't envy, don't be jealous. It's not healthy, not good for you. You're going to go down some bad pathways if you follow that path. Well, I think I just messed up that metaphor. You're going to go down some bad paths. Never mind. So I hope you get the idea. So we have these questions that are raised by the psalm. Why do the wicked seem to flourish? Or in the handout, it actually says, why did the wicked flourish? Because that's exactly what the psalmist says. Now, my vision would be, why do the wicked seem to flourish? Because I know they don't. I've been around long enough to know what happens given enough time. If you stay on the bad road for long enough, the wheels are going to come off that car. But it may take a whole lifetime, and it might not happen in that lifetime. So we look. Why? And the other thing, one of the ideas raised in this psalm is, why are the righteous often distressed? In fact, the psalmist kind of implies that the righteous are always distressed. There's always something going wrong with, really? By the way, I think you ought to read this psalm tonight, maybe before you go to bed. It's very proverbial, and many of these proverbs will ring true with you when you hear them. They'll say, "Oh, that's true." Man, he nailed it. Now, not every one of them, maybe, but you'll try it and see. And then one of the other ideas is, even if the wicked fall, and I know that you say they will, they're going to fade like grass. They're going to wither like a green herb. Their end is imminent. They won't inherit the land. I understand all that. But you know what? We fall too. One of the best verses in this one, and look for it when you're reading it, is it says, even if we do stumble and fall, you will not let us hit our head on the pavement. That's the Rinehart translation. Even if we do trip, we're not going to do a header into the pavement, because you're there. You're our protector. You're our defender. You're the one we trust. And then, of course, one of the other ideas is, and by the way, that does happen to righteous people. We do fall. We do stumble. And then he says something that we talk about often as church folks, and I think it's appropriate that we should. He says, wait for the Lord. I know of no American citizen who claimed to be a Christian that's very good at this. We're just not made that way. Now, I think some cultures are more prone to being able to wait than we are. Some of our Christian brothers in other places, because of their background and because of their history, they are more, waiting is not a big thing for them because they've been doing it their whole life. We are used to almost, if not instant gratification. So waiting for us is a very difficult thing to do, particularly when you make it abstract, like wait on the Lord. What does that mean? Well, I don't know exactly. Maybe we'll discover it as we look further into Psalms. All right, here's your homework. It's at the bottom of the page. I want to show you an example of my work. I chose it is a kind of a combination of praise and gratitude, or actually praise and joy. But anyway, I chose the letter A and B. That's not because I'm not it's not because I don't have a good imagination. I could have done anything. I just wanted to make it as simple and straightforward as I could, that this is what an acrostic psalm looks like. The first verse begins with A, the second begins with B. Not the verse, but the couplet. The idea begins with an A, the second idea begins with a B. I would like for you to spend a moment or two between now and the next time we look at a psalm or any psalm, but particularly this psalm or any other acrostic psalm, to take a moment in your closet with the Lord and write him a poem. Pick any two letters you want. I want to demonstrate. I'd like for you to see one of the thought processes and the intensity of the ideas that flow through your mind to make the first one start with M and the second one start with N. Or even better. And there are some words you can make up. You can do this. Zebras are fantastic. Bless the Lord. You can even do a Z. So don't limit yourself. Some people have favorite letters. I don't know why. I don't. But some people do. Some people have favorite numbers. I don't know why. I don't. My wife loves the number 5. I'll never understand that. But I know it's true. So we have these, I'd like for you to write this couplet. Now, at some point between now and the end of the planet, unless God comes quickly, and I think we all kind of hope that that would be true, we're going to ask you to share that poem with each other. Maybe on a Wednesday night. I don't know. We get more people here on a Sunday morning than Wednesday night, but the reason I think we ought to share them is because think of the ideas that you can communicate with the other person by sharing your This is my C and D. This is my M and N. This is who I am in relation to God on F and G. Look, I'm gonna brag just a little bit. I'm not going to ask you to do something I haven't already done. Look at the end. I'm not asking for applause. I know there will be none forthcoming. I'm not a poet. A moment with the Lord satisfies. I'll get it right in a minute. Satisfies like a long-awaited meal for the hungry laborer, and is a peaceful encounter in the day of work. What image does that provoke? Is it true? Is it generally true? Does it evoke an image that has nothing to do with God, but might still be understood in that context of what I'm trying to say? And then apply it to God. Look at the next one. Oh, I love this one. Boast. Boast in the Lord. He is mighty to save and freely provides for us, his children. He freely gives life to all who seek him. Now, this psalm, by the way, or this verse of a psalm, is definitely inspired by what Jesus has done for us. No doubt about it. So I couldn't have written it maybe 3,000 years ago. But you get the idea. I can find you a psalm that will say something very similar to this. And the reason is because that's what these songs and these psalms are supposed to do. And that's all the time I have for today. Thank you, Zoomers. Yes.
First, I want to say thank you to all of you who have helped teach this summer. I just think it's really enriched our study in the Psalms. I have to tell you, though, the next 2 weeks, I'm so excited about this. I could just squeal like a little girl. But Patricia is going to use her expertise as a biology professor at ACU. And for hopefully two Sundays, she's going to present some lessons to us based on the miraculous creation, plants, biology, botany, and tie that into our theme of being rooted, and then tie that into some Psalms. So I'm just really excited about that.